He found her lying in the desert sand, beaten and left to die. An Apache woman with no name, no voice, and a fever burning through her like wildfire. Samuel Carter didn't ask questions. He didn't know her story. He just knew one thing: if he left her there, she wouldn't survive the night. What he didn't know was that saving her life would give him back his own. Now tell me, what moved you most? Type the number 1 if this story touched your heart. And subscribe for more tales from the Wild West. Samuel Carter urged his horse forward at an easy pace along the dusty trail that led back to the ranch. Then the horse stopped. Just stopped. Right there in the middle of the path, and let out a low, uneasy whinny. A few steps ahead, lying motionless on the scorching sand, was something that didn't belong there. And it wasn't an animal. Samuel dismounted, his heart already beating hard. It was a woman, Apache. Her body was covered in bruises and scrapes, her breathing so faint he almost couldn't hear it. Her skin burned with fever. The marks on her wrists and shoulders told him everything he needed to know. Someone had beaten her badly, then left her out here to die like she was nothing. He knelt beside her and pressed 2 fingers to her neck. Her pulse was there, but barely. The wind was dry and hot against his face, but he pulled off his coat anyway and draped it over her trembling body. He didn't need to know who she was or what had happened. One thing was clear: if she stayed here, she wouldn't last the night. Samuel lifted her in his arms. She felt light, too light, as if life had already started slipping away. He laid her carefully across the saddle, and as the sun began to sink and shadows stretched long across the prairie, he turned his horse toward home. Samuel's cabin sat deep in the empty prairie, where the night wind whistled through gaps in the weathered wood, and the sound of insects mixed with the soft crackle of the fire. He carried the woman inside and laid her on the old bed, covered her with wool blankets, and began a task. He wasn't sure he was ready for saving someone the world had already thrown away. He boiled water, soaked cloths, and gently wiped the sweat and dust from her sun-darkened face. He cleaned the dried blood, the deep bruises that ran along her arms, her shoulders, her back. Her body burned with fever. Her breathing was heavy, and now and then she let out a faint moan. Lost somewhere in fevered dreams for 3 nights straight, Samuel didn't leave the cabin. He changed the water. He refreshed the cloths. He ground fever herbs he'd gathered himself from the northern hills. There were moments when it seemed she wouldn't make it. Her temperature climbed, her lips cracked from dryness, and she murmured words no one could understand. But then, in the early light of the 4th morning, she opened her eyes. The firelight flickered across those deep black eyes, filled with confusion and the wariness of a wounded animal. When Samuel offered her a bowl of water, she jerked back, flinching away from his hand. "Easy," Samuel said softly, his voice calm and low. "I won't hurt you." She said nothing, just watched him with raw suspicion. Her body was fragile, still trembling with fever, but her gaze stayed sharp, like a flame of mistrust. When he reached toward her shoulder to check a wound, she swatted his hand away so hard she nearly fell from the bed. Samuel stopped. He didn't force it. "All right," he said, stepping back. "I'll leave you be." From that day on, he never entered the room unless he had to. Each morning, a tray with fresh water and a warm bowl of porridge appeared beside her bed. From time to time, Samuel caught her peeking through the doorway as he chopped wood or led the horses to pasture. The suspicion in her eyes began to soften. Though it never fully left, it still stood there like a wall between two worlds. On the seventh day, when Samuel returned from checking the cattle, he saw the bowl had been emptied for the first time. And as he set down a fresh tray of water, her voice came from behind him. Hoarse and weak. "Why did you do this?" Samuel stood still. He didn't turn around. He just stared into the fire burning in the hearth. "Because no one deserves to die like that," he said slowly. "No one." The room fell silent. But it was no longer the silence of fear and mistrust. It was the silence of a beginning. In the days that followed, Samuel's usually silent cabin began to change in small ways. So small, in fact, that even he didn't notice exactly when it began. The Apache woman still didn't speak much. She rarely left the bed and almost never asked his name. But on the 10th morning since Samuel had found her, as he returned from leading the cattle out to pasture, he noticed something different. The bowl of porridge he'd left behind had been washed clean and placed neatly on the table. That evening, as Samuel lit the fire, she stepped out of the room for the first time. The flickering glow danced across her still weary face, but her eyes had softened. The wary glare from those early days was gone, replaced by the hesitant gaze of someone trying, just barely, to trust. "I can help," she said quietly, her voice raspy from days of silence. Samuel looked up, surprised, though he didn't show it. He handed her a bundle of wood that needed splitting, then turned back to his work. They said nothing more to each other. Only the sound of cracking timber filled the space between them. From that day on, she began to take on small tasks: boiling water, cleaning the horse stalls, laying out strips of meat to dry. Sometimes they exchanged no more than 3 words. But the air had shifted. They were no longer two strangers under one roof, but two people quietly learning how to lean on one another just to keep going. That afternoon, as the sun sank slowly toward the horizon, Samuel and the woman stood side by side, mending a fence that had been knocked down by storm winds. A hawk glided across the sky, its shadow trailing over the crimson earth. Without thinking, she spoke. "My people believe hawks carry the spirits of our ancestors. They watch over us." Samuel followed the bird with his eyes, then gave a slight nod. "Maybe they're still watching over you." She smiled gently, the first smile since he'd found her. Something delicate yet unmistakable had shifted between them. That night, sitting by the fire, she told him about her past. Her tribe had blamed her for bringing illness to their village after a deadly winter. The man who had once been her husband, along with others from the tribe, had beaten her and left her in the desert, believing her death would lift the curse. Samuel listened in silence, his gray eyes fixed on something far away. When she asked about his family, he answered simply, "My wife and daughter died of fever one winter, many years ago." They said nothing more. But in that moment, between two people the world had left behind, something had taken root. Something without a name, yet deeply felt by them both. Spring came slowly to the prairie. But for Samuel, the past days had passed with surprising speed. The cabin, once filled only with the sound of howling wind and creaking wood, now carried new sounds. The rhythm of a pestle grinding corn, the crisp pop of firewood, and every so often, the soft laughter of the Apache woman he had once rescued from the desert. She no longer did just small chores. Now she worked alongside Samuel in the fields, herding cattle to pasture, mending broken fences, even helping repair the leaky roof of the horse stable. They worked in quiet harmony, needing few words. A nod, a glance. It was all they needed to understand each other. There were moments that caught Samuel off guard. Like the afternoon he saw her mending his old coat, her sun-browned hands guiding the needle through torn seams with gentle precision. Or when she taught him a few simple Apache words. Asterisk Nantan times meant leader. She meant I. Samuel, in turn, taught her a bit of English. And they both laughed whenever one of them got it wrong. Those small gestures, so ordinary on their own, slowly carved an invisible thread between two people who once believed they could never trust again. But outside, the world was not so quick to accept. Whispers of the Apache widow living in Samuel Carter's cabin spread through town. Each time he brought goods to the market, he felt the stares, heard the sharp-edged whispers behind his back. Old Carter brought bad luck into his house. That woman will bring sickness to the whole valley. One afternoon, she overheard those very words while walking beside Samuel in town. Her face fell, her eyes darkened. That night, she sat by the fire for a long time, silent enough that Samuel could hear the crackling of the logs. Finally, she spoke. I should leave. You shouldn't have to carry the weight of their hatred because of me. Samuel closed his notebook and looked straight at her. His gray eyes, usually cold and guarded, held something firm and unwavering. No, this is your home. Too. Now, if anyone wants to look down on someone, let them turn their backs on me. But no one has the right to drive you out of this house. His words were like fire melting the ice around her heart. She said nothing, only lowered her eyes. But that night, when Samuel stoked the fire, he noticed she sat closer to him, no longer keeping her distance. In this harsh land, two people, once discarded by fate, had begun to find where they truly belonged. Thank you for being here. If this story reminded you of the old days, of red dusty afternoons and the echo of hoofbeats in your heart, then subscribe to my channel so each day we can sit together once more. And I'll tell you another tale of the West. On the day the town held its spring fair, Samuel decided to do something he'd avoided for weeks. Take her with him. It's time they saw the truth, he said, tightening the saddle straps. She stayed silent for a long moment, then gave a small nod. The dusty road into Dust Creek stretched long, flanked by patches of dry grass and the occasional cactus. As they rode into the main street, every pair of eyes turned to them. Conversations came to an abrupt halt. A few women pulled their children to the other side of the road. One man stood in the middle of the path, eyeing her from head to toe with thinly veiled contempt. Well, looks like old Carter has himself a new hobby, he sneered, loud enough for the whole street to hear. Taking in redskins now. Is that it? She lowered her head, hands clutching the edge of her skirt. Each whisper, each star, cut like a blade into the pride of a woman who had already been cast out by the world once before. Samuel pulled the horse to a stop and turned to face the man squarely. Watch your words, he said quietly, but each syllable landed like a threat. Or what? The man chuckled mockingly. You gonna get all worked up over your little squaw? Everybody in this town knows she's a curse. She doesn't belong here. Samuel swung down from his horse, stepping toward him, eyes sharp as steel. She is not a curse, he said, voice firm. She is the one I have chosen to stand beside. Then he turned to face the crowd, his voice rising across the street. And from this day forward, she is my wife. The words struck like thunder. No one said anything for a long moment. A few men dropped their gaze. Some women turned away. And many simply stood still, not daring to speak. She lifted her head. In her deep black eyes was a blend of shock, emotion, and something greater. The feeling of finally being seen, of being recognized after years of being treated as a shameful secret. They continued toward the market. The stares and whispers still followed them. But no one dared speak a word aloud again. Samuel walked beside her, his hand brushing hers as if to say, you don't have to walk alone anymore. That night, back at the cabin, she stood at the doorway for a long time, watching the moonlight spill across the prairie. Then she turned to Samuel, her voice trembling. I never thought I would be called someone's wife again. Then you were wrong, Samuel replied, his gray eyes glowing with something both steady and gentle. Summer crept in across the dry lands of New Mexico. Fresh grass began to stretch over the cracked earth, and the dry creek behind the cabin whispered back to life after a rare season of rain. For Samuel and the Apache woman, now his wife, this summer was unlike any other before. It was no longer a stretch of long, lonely, silent days, but the beginning of something far greater. One morning, she reached for Samuel's hand and placed it gently on her belly. In those deep black eyes was a look he had never seen before. Fear, yes, but also a quiet, radiant joy. Samuel, she whispered, I think we're going to have a child. Samuel stood frozen. His heart seemed to stop for a moment. For so many years, he had never let himself imagine having a family again. Since losing his wife and daughter, he had believed his heart had died with them. But now, beneath his hand, a new life was growing. A miracle he never thought he still deserved. In the weeks that followed, the little cabin grew livelier than it had ever been. Samuel built a wooden cradle from the old oak tree behind the house. She sewed blankets from the softest animal hides they had. At night, they sat by the fire, quietly discussing names for the baby. Emma, Samuel said softly, eyes gazing into the flames. That was the name of my daughter, the one I lost. She took his hand, nodding without hesitation. Emma, that name will live again. Day by day, hope grew inside the wooden walls of that prairie home. Samuel started thinking about the future, not the future of a man living alone on the edge of the frontier, but the future of a family. He built the fence higher, bought more horses to expand the ranch, and repaired the small back room to make it ready for the baby's arrival. But not everyone shared their joy. Word spread through Dust Creek. A white rancher was about to have a child with an Apache widow. Some offered congratulations, but far more brought whispers, resentment, and even threats. Samuel began receiving cold stares from men who had once been his friends. She could feel it, too, the hostility creeping in like a bitter wind. But this time, neither of them wavered. They were no longer outcasts clinging to survival. They were a family waiting for a future. And each night, as the wind blew across the rooftop and the fire crackled softly in the hearth, Samuel would rest his hand on her belly and feel the rhythm of life beating from within. A quiet reminder that the past was behind them, and the best was still yet to come. The late summer wind carried with it the scent of dry earth and distant rain. Inside the small cabin, she sat by the window, her hand resting gently on her round belly. Life had seemed to settle into a quiet rhythm, until that morning, a cloud of dust appeared on the horizon, trailing behind a band of horses. Samuel stepped onto the porch, squinting into the light. There were more than 20 riders, feathers and animal hides flapping in the wind. They stopped just beyond the ranch gate. Apache riders. Leading them was an old chief, his back straight like ancient timber, eyes deep as a canyon. She recognized him instantly. The very man who once declared her cursed and ordered her banished from the tribe. She still lives, he said in Apache, his voice cold as desert wind. And she carries a half-blood child. Samuel stepped forward, planting himself in front of the door. She no longer belongs to you, he said. She is my family now. A young warrior growled. She must return. A cleansing ritual must be done, or the spirits will be angered. She stepped out, facing the past she had once left behind. There was no trembling in her limbs now, no fear, only the calm strength of someone who had found their own worth. I survived, she said clearly, not because of you, because of my own hands and this man beside me. Murmurs rose among the riders. The chief stared at her for a long moment, then furrowed his brow. You carry a child. It will never be accepted. It doesn't have to be, she answered softly. We don't need your acceptance. This child will grow up knowing no hatred, no shame. It will learn to stand tall, something you never allowed me to do. Her words struck like a hammer against an invisible wall. Among the warriors, a few eyes wavered. A young woman stepped forward, tears running down her cheeks. We were wrong. Silence fell, heavy and long, until the chief finally nodded slowly. The path you've chosen is yours now. The ancestors will judge in their own time. He motioned for the riders to turn back. No one tried to take her. As the riders faded into the dust, she stood still for a long time. Tears fell, but not from pain, from release. Samuel stepped to her side and gently took her hand. You closed the door on your past, he whispered. She smiled softly. No, she said. I opened the door to the future. That autumn arrived as gently as a new breath of the earth. The sky over New Mexico stretched clear and endless after the rains, with white clouds drifting slowly across a sea of blue, and the wind carried the fresh scent of new grass rising from the soil. In the small cabin on the wide prairie, a baby's first cry rang out, a sound Samuel never thought he would hear again. She lay on the bed, her face damp with sweat, but her eyes glowing with joy. Samuel knelt beside her, his calloused hands trembling, as he took the tiny newborn from the midwife's arms. A baby girl, her skin warm and brown like her mother's, but her eyes a pale gray, just like his. Emma, he whispered, the name falling from his lips like a long-awaited prayer. Finally answered. She gave a faint smile. Emma, she repeated, and that alone was enough to bring tears streaming down both their faces. In the days that followed, the ranch was no longer a place of solitude and exile. It had become a true home. Samuel learned how to hold a baby, how to rock her to sleep with old frontier tales. She sang ancient Apache lullabies, melodies passed down for centuries under these same skies. The townfolk, those who once sneered and spat, now passed the ranch fence with silent glances. Some offered a nod. Others left a sack of flour or a bottle of milk at the gate. Prejudice doesn't vanish overnight. But silence itself had become a sign that maybe, just maybe, acceptance had begun. One evening, as the deep red sun sank below the horizon, Samuel carried little Emma onto the porch. She clutched his finger, eyes wide open, seeing the world for the very first time. Beside him, his wife leaned into his chest, her head resting gently against his shoulder. "Did you ever think," she whispered, "that we would have an ending like this?" Samuel smiled softly, his gaze drifting across the golden edge of the world. "No," he said, "but maybe all the pain we went through was just leading us here." Across the blazing sky, a herd of wild horses thundered through the grass, kicking up clouds of dust behind them. The wind swept through the fence line, through the small cabin, through her long black hair, and through Emma's curious eyes. And in that moment, Samuel knew he had finally found what he'd searched for his entire life. Not land, not gold, but family, a home. My friend, love on the frontier doesn't need grand promises. It is born from wounds, grows through hardship, and survives even the fiercest storms. When two souls, once abandoned by the world, find each other, they don't just build a house, they rebuild the very belief that love, no matter how late it arrives, is still strong enough to save a life. From the bottom of my heart, I truly hope you find a life filled with peace and happiness. I love you all, the cherished audience of Wild West storytelling. 5. Takeaway points. Point 1. You don't need someone's whole story to show them kindness. Samuel found a woman dying in the desert. He didn't know her name, didn't know her tribe, didn't know what had happened. But he knew enough. No one deserves to die alone like that. So he carried her home. Sometimes the right thing to do is the simplest thing. You just do it. Point 2. Trust takes time. And that's okay. For days, she flinched every time Samuel came near. She wouldn't eat, wouldn't speak. He wouldn't let him touch her wounds. He didn't push. He just left food by her bed and gave her space. Then one morning, the bowl was empty, and slowly, carefully, she began to trust. Real trust isn't rushed. It's earned one small gesture at a time. Point 3. Standing up for someone when the whole world is against them takes more than words. When the man in town called her a curse, Samuel didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He just looked that man in the eye and said, "She is the one I have chosen to stand beside." Then he turned to the crowd and called her his wife. That wasn't just protection. That was dignity. Point 4. Sometimes the family you build is stronger than the one you were born into. Her own tribe had beaten her and left her for dead, calling her cursed. But when they came back, demanding she return, she didn't flinch. She looked them in the eye and said, "I survived because of my own hands and this man beside me." She'd found her real home, and it wasn't with them. Point 5. Hope doesn't wait for permission. It just grows where it's planted. Samuel thought his heart had died with his first family. She thought the world had no place left for her. But when she told him she was carrying his child, everything changed. They named her Emma, after the daughter he'd lost. That name lived again, and so did they both. Now, tell me what you thought about this story. Leave a comment below. Type the number 1 if you enjoyed it. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, male, dramatic tales from the Wild West.